You know that feeling, right? You walk into a store, you've done your research, you know exactly what you're going to buy. It's the rational choice. But then you walk out with something totally different, something that it just felt right. This happens constantly. And here's the thing, you're making that choice in a split second, long before your logical brain can even pull up its little pros and cons list.
So yeah, let's dive into that. What is that gut feeling? What's the biological impulse that can just steamroll all of our careful, logical planning? In this explainer, we're going to unpack the actual medical science behind those split-second choices.
And this quote really hits the nail on the head. That decision, that gut feeling of yes or no, it often happens almost instantly. The logical, analytical part of our brain, well, it's basically just playing catch-up to a choice that, on a biological level, has already been made. So let's pull back the curtain and take a look at the medical blueprint that governs why we choose what we choose, often without even having a clue that we're doing it. Now, you've probably heard the term neuromarketing, and I get it. It can sound a little sketchy, right? Like some kind of secret buy button in the brain. But the reality is, this field isn't about tricks. It's the direct application of decades of peer-reviewed, established medical science. I love this analogy on the slide because it makes it so clear. Think of traditional clinical science as the mechanic. They're the experts who study the engine, the brain, and focus on fixing it when it's broken. Applied science, what we're talking about, is more like being the driver. It takes that same healthy engine and just observes how it responds out on the open road to the everyday choices we all make.
And look, the foundations here are seriously deep. We're talking about core medical and scientific fields that have been mapping the brain for a very long time, way before anyone was thinking about brands. So to really understand choice, you have to start where the doctor started, with the physical wetware of the brain itself.
Okay, so let's get into that wetware. The key to understanding all of this is actually pretty simple. Different parts of our brain operate at wildly different speeds. First up, you've got the limbic system. This is the deep, ancient, emotional core of your brain. It's the part that handles those primal feelings, fear, pleasure, trust. And it does it almost instantly. It is your brain's first responder, no question. And then, in the other corner, you have the prefrontal cortex. Think of this as the more evolved, logical CEO of the brain. It's in charge of planning, budgeting, rational analysis, all the grown-up stuff. And it is much, much slower to get going. And that right there, that speed difference is everything. An emotional connection or a feeling of, nope, not for me, can register in your limbic system in just milliseconds. Meanwhile, your logical prefrontal cortex is still booting up, while your emotional brain has already made the call. That's just the biological reality of how we choose.
Okay, so we know the brain has this two-speed system. The next obvious question is, how do scientists actually see this happening? I mean, how do they watch these incredibly fast subconscious reactions in real time without, opening up someone's head? Well, the answer comes from these amazing tools borrowed directly from medicine. Think of it this way. An EEG is like a super precise stopwatch. It measures the brain's electrical signals, telling us when a reaction happens, down to the millisecond. Then you have the fMRI, which is more like a heat map. It tracks blood flow to show us where in the brain the action is happening. You use both together, and suddenly you get the whole story.
And this is maybe the single most important thing these tools have shown us, the gap. The very real, measurable difference between what people say they think or feel and what their brain's biology is actually doing. Of course, anytime you start talking about measuring thoughts people don't even know they're having, you have to talk about ethics. And that skepticism is totally natural, and it's necessary. I mean, isn't this just a high-tech way to manipulate people? The answer, really, like with any powerful technology, is all about how it's used. When you apply this stuff ethically, the goal is never exploitation, it's understanding. And that means adopting the exact same strict standards you'd see in medical research: robust, informed consent, completely anonymous data, and a focus on creating better, clearer experiences, not on taking advantage of anyone. So you see, instead of asking, how can I trick the subconscious brain? The ethical question is completely different. It becomes, how can I communicate my message so clearly and truthfully that it works with the brain's natural systems, not against them? So where does this science become really powerful for good? Well, let's look at how it can build more trust and connection in a field where it matters most, healthcare. Okay, so we know from medical science that when a patient is stressed, their brain's fear center lights up, and that directly hurts their ability to form memories. So those jargon-filled, super confusing discharge instructions, they are biologically guaranteed to be forgotten.
By using these insights, hospitals can design clearer, visual instructions and create less stressful environments, with better lighting and simple signage that actually reduce patient anxiety and help people heal.
So, when you boil all this science down, what are we really left with? Well, it seems that for any choice to feel right, our brains are fundamentally looking for four things: emotional safety, clarity, meaning, and connection. If an experience or a message fights against any of these core needs, it's basically picking a fight with our own biology.
And really, that's the ultimate takeaway here. A choice is almost never just a simple, rational, economic calculation. It's a complex, split-second biological negotiation between our ancient emotional brain and our much slower logical self. So here's a final thought for you. The next time you get that instant gut feeling, that powerful yes or that immediate no way about an idea, a product, or even a person, just stop and ask yourself, which of those four core needs, safety, clarity, meaning, or connection, was just met? Or maybe more importantly, which one was just violated? You know that feeling, right? You walk into a store, you've got a plan. You know exactly what you're going to buy, the sensible, logical choice, and then you walk out with something totally different, just because it felt right. We've all been there. Today, we're going to dig into the actual science behind why that happens. And here's the crazy part. That feeling, that gut instinct, it happens in a flash. It's way faster than the logical part of your brain that's trying to make a pros and cons list. So what is that? What's really driving that powerful biological impulse that so often just takes over? All right, let's get into it. So we're going to unpack this idea of neuromarketing. But, and this is really important, we're going to look at it through the lens of established medical science. This isn't about some sneaky business tricks. It's about understanding the medical blueprint that's running behind pretty much every single choice you make. Yeah, when people hear that word, neuromarketing, it sounds kind of, abstract or futuristic, but its roots are deep in real, actual medical fields. We're talking about brain physiology, we're talking about psychiatry, cognitive neuroscience. This is the genuine science of how we choose. This right here, this cuts through the biggest myth about this whole thing. There's no secret buy button someone can push in your brain. It's not about that at all. Instead, all the insights come from understanding the brain's physical structure. It's wetware. And it's the very same structure doctors have been studying for decades to figure out how we feel, how we make memories, and how we react to the world around us. And because of all that medical research, we actually have a really detailed map of the brain's architecture. We know the pathways for things like fear and memory and trust. But here's the kicker. The key to all of this is knowing that different parts of that map work at completely different speeds. And this lays out the main event, the big race happening in your head. On one side, you've got your limbic system. It's ancient, it's fast, it's all about emotion. It processes stuff like fear and trust in an instant. But on the other side, you've got the prefrontal cortex, the responsible one that handles logic and planning. And that is the whole game, right there, that speed difference. Medical science shows us that a strong emotional signal hits our limbic system in just a few milliseconds. That's faster than you can blink. By the time our logical brain even starts to boot up, the gut feeling, the initial decision, has basically already been made. So we have the map, and we know about the two speeds, the two racers. But how in the world do we actually watch this race happen in real time? How do scientists actually get the data that shows an emotional spark before our conscious mind has even formed a single thought? Well, the answer is pretty incredible, and it comes from a place you might not expect. The standard tools used to figure all this out weren't invented for marketing. They were developed in clinical settings, for doctors trying to diagnose what's happening inside a patient's brain. So let's just quickly break down how these work together. First, you've got EEG. Think of that as the stopwatch. It measures electrical signals, so it's amazing for capturing the speed of a reaction, right down to the millisecond. Then you have fMRI, which is more like a GPS. It tracks blood flow, so it tells us exactly where in the brain the activity is happening. You layer that with eye tracking to see exactly what someone is looking at, and suddenly you have this incredibly rich, complete picture of a decision as it's being made. And maybe the most mind-blowing thing that all this technology shows us is this gap. It's the measurable, visible difference between what a person says they think or feel and what their brain is actually doing on a biological level. You can literally see the subconscious truth before the person has even had a chance to filter.
Okay, so I know what you're probably thinking right now. If these tools can reveal our unfiltered, preconscious reactions, well, that brings up a really big question, right? Ethics. Isn't this just a high-tech way to manipulate people?
And look, that's a completely fair question. It's a necessary one. But what the source material makes really clear is that when you apply this science ethically, with medical grade standards, the whole focus shifts. It's not about trying to trick the subconscious. It's the opposite. It's about understanding how the brain naturally works so you can communicate more clearly and honestly. And you can really see this in action when you look at fields built on trust, like healthcare. We're not talking about selling more stuff here. We're talking about using this science to get better medical outcomes. Things like designing patient instructions that people actually remember, or making public health campaigns that really connect with people. For example, just think about a hospital. We all know they can be stressful places, right? Well, medical science tells us that stress activates the brain's fear center, and that actually makes it harder to remember information. So, by using these insights, we can design hospital spaces with things like softer lighting or clearer signs that literally reduce stress hormones in patients and create an environment that's actually better for healing. So, when you take all this science, the clinical research, the brain scans, all of it, and you boil it right down to its essence, what are you left with? Well, you're left with a kind of biological blueprint for what makes any choice, any experience, just feel right. It all comes down to a few fundamental keys to connection. And here they are. It turns out our brains are fundamentally hardwired to look for these four things above anything else: emotional safety, clarity, meaning, and connection. For any message or experience to truly resonate, it has to check these boxes. If you're trying to fight against them, you're not just fighting an idea, you're fighting fundamental human biology. And at the end of the day, that's really what this is all about. It's this incredible bridge, isn't it? It connects the hard, objective, clinical science of the brain with the messy, emotional, complicated choices that all of us make every single day. It reminds us that a choice is never just a rational calculation. It's a biological negotiation between our ancient emotional core and our slow, logical self. So maybe this is the most powerful takeaway. The next time you have that instant gut reaction to something, that immediate sense of yes, this is right, or no way, just pause for a second and ask yourself, which of those four core biological needs, safety, clarity, meaning, or connection, was just met in that split second long before your logical brain even had a chance to get started? Neuromarketing. I mean, the word itself kind of sounds like science fiction, right? Maybe some shady corporate conspiracy to read our minds. But what if its real power isn't about secrets at all, but about actual hard science? What if the key to understanding why we make the choices we do isn't in a crystal ball, but in a clinical study? Let's get into it. And yeah, this is the question that's really at the heart of the whole debate. Is neuromarketing a tool for manipulation, just designed to make us buy stuff we don't need? Or is it a legitimate scientific field that can help us understand human behavior on a much deeper level? Well, the answer, as it turns out, really depends on what it's built on. For decades, marketing has pretty much been a guessing game. We're talking focus groups, surveys, basically just making assumptions based on what people say they want. Neuromarketing, though, it's a completely radical shift. Instead of asking, so what do you think? It asks, okay, what is your brain actually doing right now? It's all about trading in those fuzzy opinions for cold, hard, biological proof. Okay, so how does it feel like marketing, which is often seen as, well, fluffy, gain real, serious scientific credibility? Simple. It borrows its rulebook from the most trusted field there is for studying the human body and brain: medicine. This is really the key. I mean, how does marketing ever earn the same kind of trust we put in our doctors? By borrowing their playbook. That rigorous, proven framework of clinical research, it's not just some nice-to-have option for neuromarketing. Nope, it's the only way to build a foundation that's both credible and, just as importantly, ethical. So, what does this clinical blueprint actually look like? What is it about a medical study that makes it the gold standard for getting results you can actually trust? Well, it really boils down to these four pillars of scientific trust. First up, you've got controlled environments. You have to eliminate all the outside noise so you know what you're measuring is the real deal. Second, standardized protocols. That just means every single test has to be run the exact same way every time. Third, measurable outcomes. We're not talking about vague feelings like, yeah, I liked it. We're talking about hard data. And finally, and this one's huge, reproducibility.
If another scientist can't run your experiment and get the same results, then guess what? It's not science. It's just a fluke. All right, so how does neuromarketing actually put these principles into practice? Well, it all starts with the tools of the trade. And this is a really, really important point to get. The tools we're talking about here aren't some fancy marketing gadgets cooked up in an ad agency. No way. These are serious medical instruments, borrowed directly from hospitals and neuroscience labs. And what these tools give us is incredibly specific data. For instance, an EEG can show us exactly which parts of your brain light up the second you see a new product. Things like heart rate and skin conductance. They can tell us if you're getting excited or maybe a little anxious. And eye tracking can reveal precisely what you're looking at on a web page. I mean, literally down to the individual pixel. This is pure data, not guesswork. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because just like in medicine, a good neuromarketing study has to account for the fact that, well, we're all human. We aren't robots. Your age, how stressed you are, even what time of day it is, all of that can completely change how you respond to something. So by taking these variables into account, researchers can move past making these huge, broad generalizations and get a much more detailed and, frankly, more accurate picture of what's really happening inside someone's head. Okay, so having the right tools and the right protocols, that's one thing. That gets you good science. But the single most important principle that neuromarketing borrows from medicine, it has nothing to do with technology. It's all about ethics. This simple phrase, right here, do no harm, it is the absolute cornerstone of medical ethics. And when neuromarketing truly adopts this principle, the entire game changes. Suddenly, the goal isn't just to persuade you to do something. The goal is to understand. And look, this isn't just some vague, empty promise. It translates into real, concrete actions. It means participants are screened very carefully. It means they must give what's called informed consent, which basically means they know exactly what they're signing up for. No surprises. The studies themselves have to get approval from official ethics boards. And above all else, the physical and psychological safety of every single person involved is always, always priority number one. So what does all of this add up to? It's a fundamental shift in the entire mindset. You move from asking, how can we sell this thing, to asking, how can we create a genuinely better experience for people? It's a total pivot from control to care, from just targeting consumers to actually understanding human beings. Okay, so this all sounds very responsible and ethical, but what's the point, really? If it's not just about selling more soda or sneakers, what can this science-based approach actually be used for in the real world? Well, the possibilities are actually pretty incredible. I mean, imagine using these insights to design a hospital waiting room that genuinely reduces anxiety for patients and their families. Or what about creating a financial planning app that helps people make smarter, better decisions with their money? You could even use it to help develop new kinds of therapy for people with PTSD. This is where the real power of this field lies, way beyond just advertising. So when you get right down to it, grounding neuromarketing in real clinical science does three crucial things. First, it provides the structure you need for reliable results. Second, it gives the entire field the credibility it needs to be taken seriously. And maybe most importantly, it infuses the work with a sense of compassion and a deep ethical responsibility. So that leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? Where do we go from here? We have these incredible tools that let us understand the human brain on a level we never thought was possible. The real question is, what are we going to do with that knowledge? Is the goal just to build a better ad, or is it to build a deeper understanding of each other? Ultimately, that choice is up to us.